Hey Guru Nation, welcome back to another quick video I wanted to do. This one is from somebody who texted me. Anybody can text, by the way, any questions, 949-415-6256. Yes, that is my number. You can also email me, Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. So this one is, can you do a quick video about the do's and don'ts when monitoring at a interim monitoring visit? Specifically source data verification. So let's get source data verification out of the way. That is the easier one. That is probably the easiest task a CRA has to do. Maybe it's one of the most mundane tasks, but it is also the easiest task. And a quick side note, that is not why CRAs make the money they make. SDV is honestly not that challenging. So SDV is source data verification. What you're doing is you're looking at the source, and you're verifying that in the EDC, the data is consistent with what's in the source. Now, obviously, the do's are check every single data point unless your monitoring plan says to use risk-based monitoring, then follow their plan. Most studies still use traditional monitoring. There are increasingly so studies that are starting to use risk-based monitoring, so then you don't do every single piece of data SDV. That's the do. Obviously, going to look in detail, make sure it matches. The don't is don't assume that your job is done just because the data matches. Well, how does that data that you just saw, how is it consistent with the protocol? How is it consistent with good clinical practice? Remember, as a CRA, your job is to keep patients safe. That's your primary function as a CRA. So you got to really pay attention. You got to also know the context that you're operating in. If the patient's on their third study visit, and let's say they weigh 220 pounds, and at their second study visit, which was, let's say, 2 weeks ago, they weighed 180, you should know automatically, hey, how did this person gain 40 pounds in 2 weeks? This is a red flag. Maybe the source was written down incorrectly on the source. You may want to have a conversation with the coordinator. So that's the biggest don't. And by the way, that's not SDV. That's now becoming SDR, source data review, which is where CRAs make their money. This is why they hire CRAs. You need to have a complete understanding of good clinical practice and how it relates to the data that you're monitoring. You need to have a complete, thorough understanding of the protocol and how it relates to the data that you're monitoring. So SDV is just the beginning. It's the primary layer. That's obviously the deliverable that the FDA looks at is the data in the EDC, but it's just the primary layer. It gets a lot deeper with SDR, with GCP, and then even more so with the stuff I'm going to be talking about now. So that's a big do, is make sure the site is following the protocol and make sure the data makes sense. Sometimes you'll get lucky and the EDC system will automatically trigger a query. For example, I see this a lot with out of visit windows or out of window visits. So let's say the patient's supposed to come in the office every week plus or minus 2 days, and the patient came in plus 3 days later. A lot of EDC systems will automatically query. But what if they don't? This is where you got to know, the CRA got to know, hey, I've got to query this. But if all you're doing is doing SDV and looking that the date matches with the date in the EDC, you're not doing your job because that's potentially a protocol deviation. And don't assume that the technology is going to catch it because it won't. And the technology may catch just the simple things like out of window visits. But what about the more complicated things? What about a prohibited medication that the patient has been given in the middle of a study because of an adverse event? Well, now that's a huge protocol deviation. That's a huge safety issue. But if all you're doing as a CRA is confirming that this prohibited medication, which, by the way, these prohibited medications never show up in the source documented as prohibited. They just show up documented. Maybe it's another medical provider that prescribe the patient this medication. And maybe the PI and the coordinator are not even aware of this. So you as a CRA, this is where you're keeping patients safe. No EDC is going to trigger that. No EDC is going to query that. This is you. You've got to have a firm understanding of the protocol to know that this is a prohibited medication. You need to query it. Your job now moves from SDV to SDR, and your job now moves to maybe protocol retraining, maybe getting the patient off of the study, right? Getting the medical monitor involved. This is the do's and don'ts of a CRA. It's way more complicated than SDV. This is why it really annoys me when people try to lie on their resumes. They have no CRA experience, but they put that they do. And then they get thrown into situations like this, and you're literally putting patients' lives at risk by doing that. Some of the other things, because I do want to keep this short, make sure that you are doing IP accountability at every visit. Make sure if the study uses specific logs, that the logs are getting done at every visit. So obviously IP accountability logs at the subject level, master IP accountability logs at the site level. Make sure that you're looking for temperature excursions. Make sure that dispensing is going according to protocol. Make sure that the site is doing the actual accountability properly. Yes, you may have to actually count pills. You probably have to count pills. Um, and then beyond IP accountability, other logs, screening and enrollment log, informed consent log, AE log, protocol deviation log. These are some of the logs. We talk about these logs in the book, The Comprehensive Guide to Clinical Research. This is why that book is so good, gives you an overview. All these logs, sites tend to, especially busy sites, tend to forget to keep these up, right? And then if you forget to review them, you're going to get to like your 10th monitoring visit, and then the lead CRA is going to tell you, hey, you never collected this log. Can you collect it? And then you go look at it at your next visit, and it's mostly blank. So now you're going to spend like an hour at your next visit or longer with the coordinator completing that log, having them complete the log because you weren't keeping up to date with the log. And so beyond SDV is a lot of, regulatory, this is regulatory stuff, and then investigational product, and then training, retraining staff, for the let's use the hypothetical example I brought up of the prohibited medication uh, that the site overlooked, and now the patient's taking a prohibited med while on the study. That's a huge issue that's going to require documented retraining of the staff. You as a CRA are supposed to do that, especially for something that serious. You as a CRA, it's not enough to just say site to retrain staff. If you're there and that's a serious issue where patient's safety is at risk, you got to make sure that you're doing that and you have it documented on the training log. Then you got to look at the delegation log, updated licenses, CVs, GCPs, all those things expire. So that's the regular upkeep. So I hope this video, while it's not all inclusive, I want to keep it short, gives you an overview of the challenges, just some of the challenges that go into a monitoring visit, and how SDV, source data verification, is just the top layer. That's just the surface layer. That's like on those graphs with the icebergs. All you see is the thing above the water. Well, underneath the water is like a huge, huge thing, right? This is what monitoring is when it comes to SDV. So hopefully it helps. Hopefully it encourages you to go study this stuff. Like I said, get the book, The Comprehensive Guide to Clinical Research, link underneath, the 5-hour video I did, and perhaps CRA, CRC Academy. All right. Thank you very much. Hope this helps. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.